Good cinema has no regional or linguistic boundaries. Said by Aditi Rao Haidari. Hello!
Hello.
Welcome one more time to NCOD and welcome to another movie review. And today we have the one and only Bob Marley, One Love.
One love, one heart, one destiny.
We watched this movie not long ago, February, March.
It came out on Valentine's Day.
It did. So we watched it in February. Because I remember
yeah.
we watched it at some point close to when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
It's now April, so you're probably not going to catch it on theaters.
Yeah, it's probably on streaming now. YouTube, Prime, Apple TV to rent.
Probably, yeah. So eventually it might come to streaming services, hopefully. But I really hope you can watch this movie because I was so excited for it. Kaylin was so excited for it as well. And rightly so. Once we watched it, throughout the entire movie, I was on the brink of crying. I was just so ready.
I didn't notice that.
Well, not really, but I was in my feelings, especially with Bob Marley songs. I grew up listening to Bob Marley. More so on my middle school era, I was listening to Bob Marley all the time.
Your reggae era.
My reggae era. Reggae and rap was my thing. And Bob Marley's kids' music as well. So this was just such a good movie. We actually watched the play, the musical, I guess, in London from really high up. We were really far from the stage.
Yeah.
And it was like a concert almost. And we had a big old time.
It was an interesting musical. That one, I think, covered his entire life.
It did.
This movie covers a portion.
Yeah, it covers mostly him getting sick. It covers a little bit of when he was younger.
It's I forget what years it was, but it specifically covers when tensions were getting kind of more rough, intense.
When tensions get intense.
And so Bob leaves Jamaica, goes to the UK, and then he goes back to Jamaica for like one final concert. So that's only like
for the peace concert.
4 or 5 years maybe
Yeah.
of his life kind of covered, and then you just have flashbacks to other times in like mainly his like young adulthood. We didn't see much of him being like an actual kid.
Yeah, I don't think we did, if at all.
Yeah, I don't think so. But we saw him with kind of discovering his religion, meeting his wife, kind of a little bit of like the band starting, and then getting like discovered.
Which is one of my favorite parts when the band went to the music recording studio and they were just having so much fun. And
that was a great scene, definitely. I was okay with how much they showed. I know a lot of people were not happy that they didn't show a lot. But I'll get into it. So the initial movie, like I said, came out on Valentine's Day, directed by Reynaldo Marcus Green. It had a budget of $70 million and it made $175.9 million at the box office. So he made a profit.
Yeah.
Produced and distributed, maybe just distributed by Paramount, and one of Bob's children was a producer. So the family was pretty involved in the movie itself.
Which I guess at some points it kind of brings up the question of like, were they trying to hide some of the stuff that Bob did, like some of the bad stuff, like him cheating on his wife and stuff like that, which is so briefly mentioned, or not even mentioned, more so just implied that he has a mistress or multiple mistresses and kids with other women, I think.
But it wasn't the main
wasn't the
point
focus
of this film.
And I don't think it needed to be.
I don't think definitely not.
It was not about that.
For cast, we have Lashana Lynch as Rita Marley. Bob is played by Kingsley Ben-Adir.
Kingsley Ben-Adir actually had a really fun interview when he was mentioning how he didn't know how to play the guitar. He didn't know how to sing. He didn't know how to make a Jamaican accent. And he had a rough time, and he just was straight up with the filmmakers from the get-go, like, hey, I don't know how to do any of this stuff that I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So as long as you know that and it's a blank slate, we can go from there. And he also mentions how sometimes, so he did a lot of studying for this role, listening to Bob Marley and listening to Bob Marley's interviews, trying to get the accent right.
Yeah.
And at some points he wouldn't be able to understand what he was saying, and he would go to Bob Marley's kids and some of his Jamaican friends, and they will be like, yeah, I also don't know what he's saying. Like,
Right.
that's just Bob. Like, Bob talks like Bob talks, and you're not gonna get it.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to understand every little thing that he said. But yeah, I think he did a great job. I don't think I ever heard like a slip into a British accent. That was all like a really great accent work that he did. Really great physical work that he did too, especially with the sequences when he's actually performing the music.
Yeah, the
those really
dancing
great.
dancing, I guess.
I think what they said was that a lot of the vocals were from Bob himself, so he didn't necessarily sing it.
He didn't have to imitate Bob's voice.
Exactly. But everything else, all the physicality was him, and I did see like a side by side. And that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Very like on point of what Bob would have done.
One thing that I definitely love that they get some focus on, obviously, religion was big in his life, Jamaica was big in his life, his wife was big in his life, but soccer being big on his life was something that I'm really happy they included, because Bob really was big on soccer.
Yeah.
And you can find photos of Bob Marley with a soccer ball, and I'm just, as a soccer fan myself, I'm just really happy.
Yeah, definitely. I think like we just like briefly mentioned, there was a lot of people with an expectation that they would know more about Bob, yet they felt like they didn't really know a lot. And I know that there's people wanting specific things that he did, specific ways of life that he lived to be on the screen. I don't think that was the point, and I'm glad that they didn't include it, but at the same time I can agree that I didn't feel like I understood him more. I more understood where the music came from, and how it like kept not only himself and his bandmates going, but kept Jamaica going, and like just feeling the music and sort of try to escape the tension that was happening within the country
and trying to reunite them as well.
Yeah, but I can't say that I left this movie feeling like I knew him more. So I do understand that criticism. I felt very fascinated by everything that we learned about the religion that he's a part of. I think that clearly had such a big impact on him, and I almost wish I saw more. I almost wish I saw a little less of the songwriting process, because even then we didn't see much. We just saw them practicing it.
Or like coming up with it, which I think was really fun.
Yeah, definitely. But I feel like if I knew more of like the inspirations for the song, then maybe I would have felt like I knew him more. But obviously there's only so much that Bob probably shared with people. So it's definitely hard if his process was just something that he just came up with and people went along for the ride or whatnot. But overall, I did really like the movie.
I also loved a little bit of coming up with the design for Exodus, which became such an iconic Bob Marley album.
Yeah.
And I think that was really great to include that.
Definitely. Shall we go into some reviews?
Let's do it.
Cool. Okay. So this first one is from The Guardian. They gave the movie 2 stars.
Oh.
Yeah.
These people are really going at it.
Critics are rough.
They really are.
Critics are rough. Even by the frequently low standards of the musician biopic genre, the box-ticking Bob Marley One Love, directed by Reynaldo Marcus Green, seems a particularly uninspired and deferential plod. They said plod. I don't know what that means.
There you go. 1 out of 5.
I know. Plod around the life and legacy of the Jamaican reggae star. Cursory flashbacks, almost subliminal snippets of childhood trauma, more substantial glimpses of Marley as a young musician disrupt the flow of the film and feel too formulaic to add much to our understanding of the man he became. In the lead role, British actor Kingsley Ben-Adir captures the physicality of Bob Marley, the leonine grace and charisma, the weird spasmodic dance. The singing voice, however, is mainly Marley's own. But he's let down by a screenplay that fails to give much insight into who Marley was as a person. He's a thumbnail sketch character, with barely more substance than the billowing clouds of ganja smoke that constantly fill the frame. As Marley's wife Rita, Lashana Lynch, is saddled with a similarly underwritten role. But somehow she manages to flesh out Rita with a satisfyingly complex performance. What becomes painfully clear is the fact that Bob Marley deserves a better biopic. Still, Lynch's magnetic presence and a heart-stopping rendition of Redemption Song almost justify the price of admission.
I don't think Rita's character was badly written. I think she was really powerful in this movie, and you could really see how much Bob Marley needed her in his life. The one thing that I think I needed some more is Rita's almost dying process and him going through that with her. But other than that, I think she was in the movie as much as she needed to be.
Yeah.
Which was most of it, all things considered. And I don't know, I feel like some people didn't get exactly what they were trying to get themselves. And if they didn't get that, they just didn't like it, or they didn't approve of what was shown. But I think we need to remember that this movie was produced and tightly made by Bob Marley's family. Like, they were involved in this movie throughout all of it, and they told what they wanted to tell. Like, I know Bob Marley's life is out there in the public, like you can find it, and there is historians that study Bob Marley, but this is the story that the family wanted to tell. So I don't think anybody is right in coming and saying you need to show me this specific moment. Like, hey, this is not the first film or the first piece of media made about Bob Marley's life. Like, you can find this information somewhere else. So I think this is almost like a full circle moment for his kids and his family to try to like close a cycle almost.
Something tells me that I feel like when they were going through the film and trying to figure out what story they wanted to tell, something tells me that they were more focused on the music that he made and the impact that it had, not necessarily with the spotlight on Bob himself.
Yeah.
If they wanted to say more about Bob as a person and not just like the force he became of the music that he presented, then they would have written a different story. And I think that's where I think a lot of the marketing might have done a disservice, because I remember seeing TikToks and seeing reels of them saying like, you're gonna understand him a lot more. And that wasn't the case. You understand his music a lot more. You understand the impact a lot more, especially from us who weren't even alive when he was making this music, and we don't even know the full political scope of what's happening, but it gives you much more of an insight on what his daily thoughts were. And so that's where I feel like maybe people were given the wrong impression, and that maybe to the family they felt like you learned a lot more about him, but to me personally, I feel like I just understand a lot more about why he made the music he made, what impact it had, specifically the songs that were highlighted, what impact it had, how it brought his community together, and how he brought that joy globally.
But I disagree a little bit with that. I do feel like I understood Bob Marley a lot more, because before this movie, I knew that he had gone back to Jamaica to do the peace concert, and in my head, I was like, he kind of got into a lot of trouble, and his health was already declining. Like, why would you even do that? Like, I know you're trying to unify, but like, put your health first and then unify. I don't know, but I guess you see his process, and I mean, the movie is called One Love. This is not about necessarily a biopic about Marley. It's about how he went about making having a legacy and what he did for the world and what he left behind after dying. So I think that's what we got in this movie.
Definitely. Go on to the next one.
Yep.
This is from latimes.com. The man himself has been abstracted into an image for sale, a signifier adorning a dorm room poster. His songs of peace and freedom, the dutiful standards of beach bar cover bands across the globe. Is it possible to tell the story of his life in a way that feels remotely human? These are the questions with which one wrestles with while contending with Bob Marley, One Love, the new biopic from director Reynaldo Marcus Green. But unfortunately, the film does not undertake these complex matters. Though the movie promises to tell a culturally and politically specific story, what could have been daring is ultimately trite, relying on familiar music biopic tropes. It's a shame because at the center is a bravura performance from Kingsley Ben-Adir, who is uniquely suited to the title role. Like the singer, he is of Afro-Caribbean, Trinidadian specifically, and English descent, and he nails Marley's Jamaican patois. I hope that's how you say that word, which Green allows to flow thickly without subtitles. Ben-Adir captures Marley's voice in his wild physicality, and Green smartly keeps the camera focused on his face during the concert performances, which are transfixing. Marley's music has permeated global culture, though whether his message has been preserved is debatable. One Love does include several scenes of Marley's Rastafarian religion and his spiritual guides. These scenes are as authentic as you will get in any Hollywood depiction, and the representation is deeply moving. Yet you wish to spend more time in this culture to understand why Marley was so called to it, what has provided him as a young man searching for meaning and chosen family, and to understand the tenets of Rastafarianism that he hoped to share with the world. But we're left adrift in his story, with only generic beats providing a life raft. There's a nagging feeling that the filmmaker should have just let his life breathe, that it didn't need to be overly contextualized and non-linear presented, that the man and his music can simply speak for itself, especially with Ben-Adir's capabilities. Though the actor embodies Marley beautifully, the storytelling ultimately fails to pay tribute to one of the most singular and iconic artists of all time.
We were talking about how the subtitles could have been a thing after the movie ended. I personally felt like I understood almost all of it, and I didn't need subtitles. I feel like subtitles would just make it a different movie because it's like trying to understand Bob Marley on a different level. But you were saying that maybe subtitles could have been helpful at some points.
At certain points. I don't remember them anymore.
But I'm happy that they weren't subtitles because I feel like it gave us the opportunity to focus a little bit more even.
Yeah, because I feel like definitely with subtitles, I feel like it does this thing in your brain where you kind of almost tune out the performance to just read the lines.
Yeah.
And you might see the situation as like further from yourself since you have to read to understand it, versus if they force you to listen and watch the performance as a whole, you can identify with it more.
And it will also feel highly targeted towards targeting this movie towards people from the United States as well. Like, you gotta remember this movie is gonna be translated into like Spanish and French and Italian and all of that. And in Spanish, you're gonna have the Jamaican accent because you can make it, but you're gonna understand it a lot more because it's less thick, I guess. So having the subtitles there would just be counterproducing. But I guess you will have to have them in Spanish or you just have a different version. Technicalities about film, like once you get into making subtitles, do you make them for all languages even though you don't really need them for all of them? You just need them for like one, English perhaps. So it will feel targeted, but I don't know. I don't feel like I need it personally, but some people might have a different opinion, and I don't think either one is necessarily wrong.
Yeah, definitely. As far as like what this was talking about, religion, I definitely agree. I found that to be really moving. It was
super
just
interesting.
A raw representation of it. Like, it wasn't pretending to be anything that it wasn't.
I really enjoyed the guy that he was following that had the really long hair.
The mentor that he had, it was just really fascinating. I had never seen any sort of representation of that before. So I found that very fascinating. And yeah, of course, like, I want to know more. But I feel like they showed enough of it for this particular film with like the way that they were going with it.
Because I feel like showing more of that when he was younger is really helpful for the film because it shows the way he grew up in this religion and how it influenced the actions that he's taking when he's older and already famous, but showing a lot more when he's already older and will kind of deter from them trying to deliver the message and just like being on a dead horse of like, look, back to the religion.
I think overall this film just makes me want to know more.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the goal, maybe it wasn't. But I'm just there's just so much more that I'm like curious about, like how much like his own ideas played into the songs he was talking about, kind of tracking what song he wrote based on what might have been happening where he was living. And like tracking from there different things that he was speaking about in his song that again, like you lose that translation over time because you're not actively in that same political space anymore. So I found the whole thing really interesting overall. I really liked it.
Yeah, and I think it keeps it alive. It keeps the memory alive, and like you said, it makes you want to know more, which also makes you actually research and look more into it, which I think might serve a good purpose.
Hence why I think it was an incredibly good decision to leave his more personal relationship things out of it, because that just takes it away. And I saw a lot of people saying that they already know kind of all like the tea and the drama. It's not exactly new news. And it wasn't exactly hidden. But that...
Yeah, this is widely known.
Focusing on his personal relationships just takes away from the music. And that's, I think, what this is trying to do is to revert the conversation back to what was important to Bob at the end of the day. And what is important in his legacy. He has a legacy because of this, not because of who he happened to have been with at some
Once
points.
again, not the focus of the film.
Exactly.
Do we have another review? Or
No, that's it.
Well, I really enjoyed this movie. I will definitely go give it a watch when you can. If you like Bob Marley, you're going to get to see a lot of his music and just get a little bit more into his life. If you've never listened to Bob Marley or you're not a huge fan, watch it. You're going to actually become a huge fan after this movie, I think.
Songs are really good. Yeah. There's some fun sing-along times that
and there's behind the scenes of how they made that. I don't know how accurate it is, but I love to believe that it is to the T. Out of 5 clapping boards, how many would you give it?
I'd give it a 4.
Yeah.
Pretty solid.
I'll give it a 4.2.
Why not 4.5?
Because I really... 4.5? Okay, so I've said this in the past. I gotta look at my scale. I don't think it's on the level of other 4.5 movies that I've rated. But it's definitely not just a 4. So
it's a little more than a 4.
It's a little more than
not
a
a
4.
5.
Not a 5.
Not
Not a
exactly
5.
4.5.
We go based on vibes in here. It's all vibes. And I'm vibing at 4.2.
You're vibing at 4.2. Great.
Yeah, so 4.1 overall clapping boards amongst the two of us if you average it out.
Math.
Thank you so much for being here one more time for another movie review. You can follow us on Instagram as NCOT the podcast. You can follow our YouTube channel where you can find the recording of this film, of this podcast as That Film Couple. You can also find us on YouTube for short form content as That Film Couple. You can find us on Twitch as Sebas Parra 1K for some gaming and some other stuff. And you can find, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can listen to this podcast on any podcast platforms as NCOT !. And you can find me on Instagram as sevi.mp4.
And you can find me at caitlin.mp4.
This is all for us today. And please give us a like, a follow, or a comment, or anything that you might desire, depending on the platform you're on. We would love to hear from you guys. And we hope to keep this going with more Bob Marley later on.
Yeah.
And okay, no, that was kind of anticlimactic. We'll see you in the next one. And cut.